Welcome to Boring Stories from Rome, where we'll discover how the Roman emperors managed to bring the world's most fearsome predators to entertain a bloodthirsty crowd. But brace yourself, because the answer is much more disturbing than you might think. Let's start with a simple question. How is it possible to transport several 300-kilogram Siberian tigers from the frozen forests of Russia to the heart of the Mediterranean using only wooden ships and ox-drawn carts? And the most incredible part, these tigers traveled over 6,000 kilometers through scorching deserts, freezing mountains, and territories controlled by tribes that would kill any Roman who dared pass through. They survived months of torture disguised as transportation, saw dozens of their brothers die beside them, all to be here in this moment, being watched by you. This is not just a story about Siberian tigers in the Roman Colosseum. It's about what happens when an entire civilization decides that no price, neither human, animal, nor environmental, is too high to satisfy its endless thirst for spectacle. And if you manage to make it to the end of this journey still awake, tell me what your reaction would have been on those bleachers 2,000 years ago. Because I guarantee it would have been much more complicated than what you imagine now, lying comfortably in your bed. Welcome to the most absurd and brutal story of the Roman Empire, when emperors turned the entire world into a horror shopping mall. But first, go ahead and subscribe to the channel and leave a like. The Bloodsport Trade. This is where the story gets really sinister. Capturing an adult Siberian tiger was practically impossible. They are solitary, territorial, and strong enough to break a buffalo's neck with a single bite. So, the hunters did the unthinkable. They killed the mothers and captured the cubs. For every tiger that arrived alive at the Colosseum, conservative estimates suggest that at least 10 died in the process. Hunger, thirst, disease, injuries, stress. The mortality rate was astronomical. The Roman merchants basically wiped out entire populations of Siberian tigers to entertain a bloodthirsty crowd. And the worst part? They knew exactly what they were doing. But the emperors didn't care. They understood something that modern politicians still struggle to grasp. The Roman people didn't just want bread. They wanted a bloody, spectacular arena that money could buy. And if that meant draining the imperial treasury to bring predators from the ends of the earth, so be it. Emperor Trajan, during his victory celebrations, killed over 11,000 animals in just 123 days of games. Tigers, lions, bears, rhinos, elephants. A localized extinction financed by taxes and military conquests. The hypogeum. Elevators to hell. Underneath the Colosseum arena was a true underground city, the hypogeum. Dozens of chambers, tunnels, mechanical elevators, and elaborate traps. This is where the tigers waited for their death sentence. Imagine this. You are a Siberian tiger, used to snowy forests and territories of hundreds of square kilometers. Now, you're locked in a 2x3 meter cage, 15 meters below ground level, listening to the deafening screams of thousands of people above your head. The Mediterranean heat melts your thick fur. The thirst is constant, and the only human contact you know ends in pain. The Romans built pulley and counterweight systems that could raise entire cages to the arena in seconds. It was pure theater. One moment the arena was empty, the next a hungry, terrified tiger would emerge from the ground like an apparition. The games, morbid creativity. But the Romans weren't content with just releasing tigers into the arena. Oh no, they were creative with their sadism. There were the venaciones, staged hunts where groups of specialized gladiators, the bestiarii, faced multiple predators simultaneously. Imagine a Siberian tiger, already stressed and disoriented, forced to fight men armed with spears and nets, while 50,000 people cheered for its death. Then there were the public executions. damnatio ad bestias, where criminals were tied to posts and left as live snacks for the tigers. The crowd loved it when the condemned ran in circles, trying to escape the claws and fangs. It was like a sadistic video game, but real. And the crown jewel battles between species: Siberian tiger versus African lion, brown bear versus Nile crocodile. Roman gamblers made fortunes trying to predict which predator was deadlier. The ecological collapse. The ecological collapse caused by the Romans is a dark chapter in the history of the empire, rarely discussed in traditional narratives, like in gladiator films. During the 400 years of games in the Colosseum, the Romans didn't just use animals as mere entertainment, but contributed to the extinction of entire species. The demand for exotic animals and the brutality of the games resulted in mass extermination, with about 1 million animals killed, including Siberian tigers, African elephants, Barbary lions, and Nile hippos. These animals, already rare or difficult to find in some regions, were brought to Rome through a trade network that connected the empire to distant parts of the known world. They were sacrificed in the arenas, not for subsistence or study, but as mere objects of entertainment for the population. The Siberian tiger, for example, almost disappeared from areas near Roman trade routes, and the Barbary lions, known for their strength and beauty, were driven to extinction due to relentless hunting. This ecological collapse wasn't just an accident. It was a direct consequence of Roman practices that turned nature into a disposable commodity to satisfy their thirst for blood and entertainment. The Roman Empire, by exhausting entire species for fun, created the first documented ecological collapse in history, showing how disrespect for animal life and nature can lead to the irreparable loss of biodiversity. While Rome spent fortunes on bloody spectacles, disregarding environmental damage, the impact of this excessive exploitation of natural resources echoed through time. Today, the legacy of this ecological collapse serves as a reminder that the reckless pursuit of immediate pleasure and the irresponsible consumption of nature have devastating and lasting consequences, the human cost. But what about the men who captured these animals? The merchants who financed these suicidal expeditions? The gladiators forced to face Siberian predators armed with only a spear and a net? The life expectancy of a bestiarius, a gladiator specialized in fighting animals, was about 6 months after their first performance. 6 months. Most didn't make it through 10 fights before ending up as tiger food. The capturers had an even worse mortality rate. Entire expeditions disappeared in the Siberian steppes, leaving only bleached bones and empty cages as evidence of their ambition. The blood economy. The blood economy in Rome was a reflection of the empire's excess and decadence. To satisfy the population's thirst for entertainment, emperors spent vast fortunes importing exotic animals, like Siberian tigers, whose costs were equivalent to 10 years of a common worker's salary. These animals were used in bloody games in the arenas, where most died quickly from stress, injuries, or exhaustion. These spectacles were a form of bread and circus, meaning a strategy to keep the population distracted and controlled, while the empire faced growing difficulties on its borders and a severe internal financial crisis. The cost of these imports and the increase in violence in the games drained the public coffers, while Rome invested more and more resources in a culture of brutality, neglecting the real needs of the population and urgent political issues. As the empire struggled to maintain security on its borders, attention was focused on the games, and scarce resources were diverted to maintain this illusion of grandeur. The story of the Siberian tigers brought to Rome symbolizes how violence and spectacle became priorities for the rulers, who, instead of focusing on solving the empire's problems, invested in oppression and bloodthirsty entertainment to maintain their authority. Over time, this investment in the blood economy proved unsustainable. The empire, in trying to sustain its strength through these games, contributed to its own downfall, as wealth was drained and the capacity to respond to real problems was the dark mirror. While you're here, comfortably listening to this story, perhaps lying in your warm bed, with clean water just steps away and food in the fridge, think about this. The Romans weren't more cruel than we are. They were just more honest about it. We still import products from distant places without asking about the real cost. We still consume entertainment that exploits both humans and animals. We still turn a blind eye to environmental destruction when it happens far enough to not bother us. The difference is that the Romans did it in public amphitheaters, with 50,000 witnesses cheering. We do it in distant factories, invisible plantations, and slaughterhouses we never visit. The Siberian tiger in the Colosseum died for our ancient thirst for spectacle. How many tigers die today for our thirst for convenience? The final irony. Here's the final irony of this absurd story. The Colosseum, this monument to cruelty and excess, is now a global symbol of historical heritage. Millions of tourists visit its ruins every year, taking selfies where once Siberian tigers bled into the sand. We've turned history's greatest slaughterhouse into a tourist attraction. Perhaps that says something about our complicated relationship with the past, or about our infinite capacity to romanticize horrors when they are conveniently distant in time. Exhausted. Now, I want you to imagine something. You're in those bleachers in the Colosseum on a hot Roman summer day. The crowd is shouting, the sand is stained with red, and a hungry, terrified Siberian tiger has just emerged from a trapdoor. The question isn't whether you would cheer for the tiger's death or the gladiators. The question is, would you have the courage to stand up and leave? And more importantly, what in our current society do you have the courage to question, even when everyone around you is applauding? Because in the end, the difference between being Roman and being human might be smaller than we think. The only real difference is whether we choose to see the blood in the sand, or whether we prefer it to remain conveniently invisible. If you made it this far, it means you've got the stomach for the most uncomfortable truths of history. And that makes me wonder, what other boring stories from Rome would you like me to tell? Maybe you'd like to know about the slaves who built the Colosseum itself? Or what really happened behind the scenes of imperial banquets? How about the truth behind how the Romans invented the concept of public hygiene, and why that wasn't necessarily a good thing? Leave a comment telling me, what part of this story impressed or disturbed you the most? If you were in those bleachers, what would your reaction have been? What other mundane aspects of Roman life would you like me to explore? Or just tell me, what intrigues you about civilizations that we consider advanced, but that did absolutely barbaric things? Because these aren't just old stories, they're mirrors. And sometimes, looking in the mirror is the bravest thing we can do. Until the next story that will keep you awake thinking.